tell you a secret.
Hi, you all. Welcome to Unbottled Secrets, the channel where my truth becomes your entertainment. My name is Fakira, and I make faith based lifestyle and micro locks content. So, if you love the Lord and want to get to know me, then you will love this channel. Since the bulk of my content on this channel is centered around my own walk in Christ and providing biblically sound tips on how you too can navigate this journey, I figured why not share my testimony on how I went from depressed and drowning in sin to God giving me a second chance at life. So, if this is something you may be interested in, please continue watching. So, for context, your girl was raised in the church, and I kind of say that literally because I spent some nights in that church. Living with my grandma, going to church was definitely mandatory. It was not an option. So I would go to church on Sunday, Wednesdays, Thursdays, Saturdays for choir rehearsal. I was on the praise dance team. I was in the choir. I was the Sunday school secretary. I was doing oratorical contests. I was going to conventions. I was going to vacation Bible school and Bible youth camp during the summers. And if there was a funeral at New Mount Zion, I was the dedicated juice girl. If you know, you know. So, needless to say, I knew that church inside out. Because I was heavily involved in the church, I thought I had a relationship with God. And it didn't take until me getting into my late 20s to realize that I did not know God. The way I viewed God was distant. I believed that God was the supreme deity that was so far away, who was very vengeful and had a lot of wrath. I would hear statements like, God is a jealous God, the harping on sin, instead of, why we should not sin. And I barely heard the gospel preached in church except for during the holidays and during altar call. And for a long time, it just never connected. So, yeah, I didn't understand that I could view God as a father, someone who corrects me when need be, but also truly love me. So when I messed up, which we all do, I was afraid to pray to God because I thought he was angry. I thought he would not care to listen to me because I am actively sinning. And honestly, truthfully, I can't blame that on a church because the church I went to did provide biblically sound doctrine. I just didn't study to show myself approved. I was only looking to a pastor to give me knowledge of God instead of seeking God for myself. So it came to a head when I left home because the hedge of protection I had at that church, I guess, dwindled when I went off of school and I wasn't going to church and I wasn't reading my word. So I ended up spiraling down this very dark path. And it's crazy because I am not the only one who has a testimony of how going to college aided in the Christian deconstruction. A lot of people go to college and they find themselves dibbling and dabbling in New Age spirituality, dibbling and dabbling in other religions, or taking a philosophy class like I took and deciding to be agnostic or atheist. Now, I can honestly say college definitely had a large role in my confusion in my faith, especially when it came down to spirituality. And I can trace my start of deconstruction to one seismically destructive documentary, and that is Hidden Colors. Now, I'm not going to go into detail about the documentary or how I dibbled and dabbled in New Age spirituality, because I do have an entire podcast episode on the trap of New Age. I will link it somewhere on the screen so you can take a listen. But between that documentary, between me getting very enamored with the African culture, and yes, I know Africa is a continent. So the more I learned about the continent and all these different cultures, I kind of strayed from my faith. And it was because in those documentaries, they would mention how like Christianity was a ripoff of the Egyptian pantheon, or talking about how, before Black Americans came to the Americas, we were in these other different religions. So the more I got closer to my Blackness and my love for being Black, surprisingly, the further I strayed away from Christianity. So much so that I went from labeling myself as a Christian to more so just labeling myself as spiritual. I didn't know what I didn't know. I knew that there was a God somewhere up there, so I could never be atheist, but I just didn't know. And it was more so, I don't even want to know. I'm just here living on this big, 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 big earth. So I did some dibbling and dabbling in New Age spirituality, but more so I was just here. So fast forward, I leave college and I moved to Houston to start grad school. And when I tell you, it was like my anxiety increased. That hedge of protection I felt as a kid, because I can honestly say God, even in me not knowing him, he still protected me. I just always felt safe, right? And moving to Houston, I didn't feel safe. I felt alone, and both physically alone because I did not have family here when I first moved here, but also alone in my thinking, alone in not feeling like I had anyone to talk to. I couldn't pray to God because I was actively sinning. So going back to being a kid and afraid to pray to God because I'm actively sinning, I didn't think he would care to hear me. So I just kind of spiraled, and it was really bad, to the fact that I would think about death every single day, and not just the act of dying, but more so what was on the other side for me when I died. It quite literally freaked me out, and it didn't help because I also had unaliving thoughts. So it's just like, well, I don't want to be here. I am very depressed. I'm in this very low pit, but I can't do anything about it because I don't know what's on the other side. So I guess in one aspect, me being afraid of the afterlife saved me. But yeah, it was a very low time. But no one knew because I would smile on social media. I would look happy, like nothing was going on. I really didn't talk to my family about it. I didn't talk to my family about it at all. But yeah, when I would talk to my family, it was very surface level. So I was just in Houston living life, and they thought everything was good. But internally, I was feeling a void, a very huge void, a God-sized void. And I remember back in 2018, it was the summer of 2018, and I was lying on my bed just crying. The sun was out, but I felt dark, right? And I just remember looking up at the ceiling, just praying to God for a do-over. A God I barely talk to, right? Just praying for a do-over because I just felt like this life that I was living had no purpose. And I guess you could say I was depressed. I was very depressed. And just at my lowest, of course, I picked myself up, still went through the routine of life, but that void just would not leave me. It just would not go. And I would try to fill that void with sin, right? I would try to fill it with sex. I would try to fill it with alcohol. I would try to fill it with a little puff puff, and nothing would help. If anything, it made it worse because as I was actively sinning, I was feeling afraid like, gosh, if I died in this, I'm going to hell, whatever hell looked like. So I could just not escape me. And to keep this video short, I was actively sinning, comfortable in my sin, but still afraid to die and not having an outlet to pour into. My sister died in 2022. And it was something about that moment that was like a switch. And I realized the way that I was living, I could not keep doing it. I could not keep trying to fill myself with things that were not good for me. So I decided I'm going to read the Bible. I'm gonna take this walk with God seriously. I'm gonna read the Bible. But of course, I wasn't reading to study. I wasn't reading to actually learn about God and to get to know God. I was just reading to just check off the fact that I read the Bible, to make myself feel good about, oh, I'm reading the Bible. So I read Proverbs. I was reading Psalms. We were doing like certain Bible challenges. But it wasn't until I had this conversation with this one girl who was a part of this church group, and we were at a coffee shop, and she told me to read the Gospel of John. She said that's a good starting point for anyone interested in getting to know God. So I started to read John begrudgingly because her and her friends were a little bit overbearing, and they would call me every single day to ask how it was going. And I'm like, oh my gosh, y'all getting on my nerves. But in hindsight, I thank God for that because it held me accountable. And I was reading. In my reading, I realized that this man named Jesus was such a loving person. He didn't lead with your sins is sending you to hell, but it was very much so love. And then we get to the part where he dies on the cross and he's raised again. And even the way that John ends the gospel just makes you realize that God really loved us, and it just all made sense. And it wasn't something that I could have done for God to love me and show me mercy. It was because he loved us as a whole. So once I finished reading the book of John, it was just like a light bulb went off. And I just remember grinning like, God, I get it. Like, you really did this for me, a whole little me. And I just felt like the world was just lifted off of my shoulders. I didn't feel alone anymore. And even though I couldn't audibly hear the voice of God, I could just feel it in my spirit that God was saying, you don't have to live this life alone. I got you. I am here for you. I have been waiting for you. And as someone who doesn't feel like she could really talk to people and be completely vulnerable with people, I knew in that moment I could be completely vulnerable with God. And yeah, on November 15th, 2022, I gave God my yes. Like, when I tell you I went to sleep like a baby, like I've never felt that much peace in my entire life. Like, God is so good. Oh, just when you think about it, because, and I'm sure I've said it on this channel, but I could have really died in my sin. The amount of time that I blatantly knew what I was doing, and more so like scoffing in the face of God, he could have took me out. There were so many instances where I played with my life. But he did not. forsake me. He was still merciful in my sin. He was still gracious in my sin because there was a lot of blessings that he gave me that I did not deserve. And then it just kind of made sense of like why God brought me to Houston. I had to be isolated. I had to get out of the routine of Christianity to really know who God is. And so, yeah, since November of 2022, I've been rocking with God, and this journey has been amazing to say the least, even in the spiritual warfare, even with the trials and the tribulations. I welcome it because in this life, you're going to struggle. It's just a given of being human. But it's something about struggling when you have God on your side. The struggle just don't struggle the same. It's just like, oh, okay, I'm gonna get past this because as long as I have breath in my body, God has a purpose for me. And obviously the biggest one is when I die, I ain't going to hell. I am spending eternity with God. Like, imagine being able to just spend eternally just knowing the mind of God, getting to know him, communing with him the way that we should have from the very beginning. Like, God, I just thank you for waiting on me. So with that being said, we have reached the end of this video. I hope you gleaned something meaningful. In the comment section below, tell me your testimony. How did you come to Christ? Were you always a Christian? Did you come to Christ later in life? Is there anything in my testimony that resonates with you? If you want a longer form story of my testimony, please let me know because there's a lot of things I left out, but I really wanted to keep this conversation very short and succinct. And yeah, if you like the vibes and you want to join the Society of Secret Keepers, please hit that subscribe button. Like this video. I think I said that already, but just in case I didn't, like this video and share if you care. And until next time, bye.